Hello everyone and welcome. In this video, we're going to take a closer look at the hair tissue mineral analysis of a 41-year-old male, one of my patients. I'm going to share my screen right now so you guys can see the test. A 41-year-old male. Obviously, I've removed his name to maintain his anonymity. And here in his intake questionnaire, we can see that his main symptoms are severe migraine headaches, nausea, vomiting, and chronic constipation. This is important to remember as we go through his hair tissue mineral analysis when I make a few connections between his biochemical imbalances and these symptoms that he is complaining of. So let's start. So we're going to start here with the toxic elements. As you'll notice, he's presenting a good variety of toxic heavy metals. Uranium, a little bit of arsenic, mercury, a little bit of cadmium, lead, and aluminum. And although they are not in the high, they're not all the way up here, it is still concerning. Many practitioners will say it's not concerning, but the way I see it, it is concerning because the hair tissue is an excrement tissue, just like urination, perspiration. And when we see heavy metals in the hair tissue, that basically means that the patient is being exposed to these heavy metals, these toxic heavy metals, on a regular basis from their environment, from their food supply, from their water supply, etc. And from my experience, when I see a good variety of toxic heavy metals, which is not very common, most people have 1, 2 to 3 toxic heavy metals, mainly aluminum, mercury, and arsenic. So when I see a great variety, I always immediately suspect contamination of the water supply. And when I inquire, when we have the consultation with the patient one-on-one, when I inquire, I see that they're not filtering their water. And in this case, he wasn't filtering his water. So this was a classic case. Very likely when he does his retest, we will see improvement in his toxic heavy metal levels. And what I recommended for him was to purify his water supply by using either a water distiller machine or installing reverse osmosis system in his home. So one thing that should be mentioned about these toxic heavy metals generally, when they are in the low, or if they're not even present, that does not necessarily mean that the patient doesn't have toxic heavy metals stored in their body, in their fat cells, in their brains. Because toxins, including heavy metals, are stored mainly in fat cells, in the brain and in the body. And oftentimes, the body does not have the strength or the ability to detoxify all of these heavy metals and other toxins effectively, all of them from the body. So when we see these heavy metals in the hair analysis, we are only seeing the heavy metals that the patient's body is able to detoxify. When you're exposed to toxic heavy metals from your food supply, water supply, etc., what we see in the hair analysis are the heavy metals that the body can safely eliminate. Another 50%, another good amount of those heavy metals the body is unable to detoxify, and they accumulate over the days, over the weeks, over the years in the body. So it's very safe to assume that most people living in this day and age, they're heavily loaded with toxic heavy metals. And so for him, in addition to purifying his water supply, I recommended TRS. I'm just going to pull up my website right now so you guys can see what I'm talking about. I'm just going to show you guys right now. Let's go to SoReadyForHealth.com. So heavy metal detoxification is something I recommend to all of my patients, including gut detoxification, because everybody is dealing with gut infections. We're going to get into that a little bit later. But if you go to my website and you go to shop, you'll see TRS here. You'll click on it, you'll learn more about it. And it's one of the most effective ways and safe ways to remove heavy metals from the body and from the brain. And specifically for him, I highly recommended for him to prioritize TRS because he's complaining of severe migraine headaches, okay? So we're seeing that he's exposed to a lot of heavy metals. Much of it can be accumulating in his brain. And TRS will effectively remove these heavy metals from the brain and purify his brain over time. So TRS, unlike any product on the market, has the unique ability of passing the blood-brain barrier. Okay, because what they did was they created an artificial version of zeolite. Zeolite is a very powerful natural heavy metal chelator, but it's molecularly too large to pass the blood-brain barrier. So what they did is they recreated the same shape of zeolite, but much smaller, so that it can pass the blood-brain barrier, okay? So that's what I recommend for him, because most brain conditions are brain toxicity issues which nobody talks about. No doctor, no psychiatrist, nobody ever considers, which just blows my mind, right? The brain is the fattiest organ of the body, the fattiest organ, and toxins are stored in fat cells. So over time, with all the glyphosate, all the toxic heavy metals, which and an emulsifier such as polysorbate 80, and the literature shows that it effectively passes your blood-brain barrier by 20-fold. So depending on when you were born and how many injections you've received, your brain is full of toxic heavy metals and infections, but that's for another day, okay? So for him, I've recommended for him to prioritize, on the one hand, reduce exposure to toxic heavy metals, very likely from his water supply, which we will check and see if that happened to be the case when he starts filtering his water. When he does a retest of his hair tissue mineral analysis in 6 months, 8 months, 1 year, we can then compare and see if in fact it was his water supply. And also using TRS. So by using TRS, he's going to start removing a lot of those heavy metals from his brain and improve his migraine headaches. So that's it for the toxic heavy metals right now. Let's move on to the nutritional elements. Many of you are familiar with calcium, magnesium, sodium, potassium, copper, zinc, so that's what we're going to look at right now. When we look here, we see that his calcium is very high, 224, right? Way above the reference range, what is considered to be normal, right? The upper limit of what's considered to be normal is 100, and his calcium is 224, off the charts. So there are two main reasons why we are seeing a lot of patients with extremely high calcium levels. It's not because they're consuming too much calcium. I mean, in very odd cases, we will see patients supplementing with a lot of calcium, but for most patients it happens to be two reasons. One is because of systemic acidosis. The body has become too toxic, too acidic, and so the body is intelligently pulling calcium from out of the bones and neutralizing, alkalizing these acids, okay? Not only in the tissues, but also in the blood, in the bloodstream. And you know, many patients, when they test their blood, they see that they're dealing with hypercalcemia in the blood. And again, it's because the body is trying to maintain the pH of the blood, because if the pH of the blood shifts by just 0.2, you're going to go into coma and you're going to die. So it's an intelligent response by the body, pulling calcium from out of the bones, putting it into the tissues, putting it into the blood supply to maintain your body's alkalinity. One of the analogies that I like to give is that of the ocean and the coral reef. The coral reef is mainly composed of calcium. And as the world becomes more polluted, as the oceans become more toxic and acidified, what are we seeing? We are seeing that the coral reef are shrinking. Why? Because they're mainly composed of calcium, and the calcium begins to react with the acidity, the increased acidity of the ocean, and it starts to dissolve. So that's exactly what's happening with the human body. You have an inner ocean, the interstitial fluids, which is the largest organ of the body, which was discovered just a few years ago, but the modern day medical establishment has not caught up with the science, and I don't think they will anytime soon. So a lot of people are dealing with systemic acidosis, very acidic body, infections in the gut, which are producing some of the most cancer-causing chemicals, mycotoxins, biotoxins in the body, polluting your inner ocean. People are dealing with tooth infections, which are producing biotoxins. They're on toxic pharmaceuticals. The beverages they enjoy, coffee and alcohol and pop, all acidic, right? Their food is acidic. Even their thoughts can be acidic. All the fear and anxiety can pollute your inner ocean and acidify your body. So radiation as well. So on and on, etc., etc. We're dealing with an epidemic of systemic acidosis, and this is an intelligent response. Another reason why calcium can show very high in the body, as well as magnesium, which we're seeing is his case as well, is poor calcium and magnesium metabolism. So the body's not able to metabolize these key minerals because of vitamin B6 deficiency. So your gut, the healthy bacteria, the good bacteria in the gut, should be producing proper amounts of vitamin B6 to make calcium and magnesium bioavailable, to metabolize them. But because of modern day broad spectrum antibiotics, because of all the pesticides and fungicides and glyphosate and chlorine in your water supply, fluoride in your water supply, there's a huge assault and attack on your microbiome. And as your good bacteria get wiped out, they can no longer synthesize a lot of the key nutrients that you need, not only for to metabolize these different minerals, but also for proper mental health, for example. Many of the B vitamins are needed for mental health, such as niacin, vitamin B3. What else? The good bacteria are also responsible for converting vitamin K1 to K2 so that K2 can make calcium and pull calcium and put it into your bones where it's supposed to be. So the science is catching up and realizing that the destruction of your microbiome is really destroying every aspect of human health. Hormonal health, because the good bacteria in the gut, which should be responsible for producing over 60% of the natural antidepressant serotonin, they're no longer producing it. We're dealing now with an epidemic of depression, etc., etc. So the good bacteria are involved in so many functions, in vitamin synthesis, in vitamin conversions, in hormonal health, in brain health, etc. And so this is why we have recommended, just show you guys quickly, high doses of vitamin B6 over here as part of this synergistic formulation, Minplex B. I'm going to go into why these two as well in just a bit, but high doses of vitamin B6, upwards of 100 milligrams daily, okay? A lot of patients say, Nabil, I'm taking a B complex. Isn't that enough? And the answer is it's not enough, because if you look at the dosage, it's typically 5 milligrams of B6, maximum 10 milligrams. That's just not enough. So anybody dealing with poor calcium and magnesium metabolism and poor glucose metabolism, which we're going to take a look at, they need higher doses of B6, and that's what these formulations provide. So those are the two major root causes of poor calcium metabolism. One is systemic acidosis, which we're going to get to the root of, which I've made these recommendations for the patient to detoxify their guts, which is the main source of the production of biotoxins and mycotoxins, 25 feet of intestines full of infections, right? Because when the good bacteria are wiped out because of broad spectrum antibiotics and all the other assaults on your microbiome, when these natural competitors are removed, what happens? The weeds grow, right? Just like a garden, the weeds start to grow, and the weeds in this case are parasites, fungi, which is candida, and pathogenic bacteria. They all thrive together, and over the years, over the decades, they just keep growing more and more. They become systemic as well, and they produce some of the most cancer-causing chemicals known as mycotoxins, right? Fungal poisons. So I recommend my gut detox to the patient. I recommend a change of diet, alkalize their diet, take a look at their diet during the 1-hour consultation and point out what are the foods that they're enjoying every day which are extremely acidic. Are there any alternatives that they can substitute with which are more alkaline? For example, that's something we do as well. When we look at the magnesium, you see it's high. You could say that maybe it's because he's supplementing with magnesium, because he does say here he's supplementing with magnesium, right? But when I inquired, if I recall properly, it was a low dose. It was just like 200 milligrams. And that's extremely low. The requirements for the body for magnesium is very, very high. Okay, very high. 500 to 1,000 milligrams a day is not a high dose. So it's safe to say that the high magnesium that he's demonstrating is not because of supplementation, okay? That it's because of poor magnesium metabolism. Okay, now when we look at sodium and potassium, both of them are borderline low. And if you know anything about sodium and potassium, they are the main electrolytes of the body. The kidney is responsible for regulating them and retaining them as well. And so when I see both sodium and potassium borderline low or even low, I immediately suspect weak kidneys or adrenal fatigue, or in traditional Chinese medicine they say weak kidney qi, okay? Low blood pressure, all of these different things come to mind. So what I do immediately is I see if I can confirm this with these significant ratios over here, and lo and behold, in the adrenal ratio, sodium to magnesium, the adrenal ratio is the kidney ratio essentially, we see that it's in the low, which indicates adrenal fatigue or kidney weakness. So now it's confirmed. It's confirmed that his electrolytes are going borderline low, and if he doesn't treat adrenal fatigue and strengthen his kidneys, then over time it's going to go even lower, and he's going to have some, massive complications. So that's confirmed here. Now, how do we treat adrenal fatigue? Now, I could spend a half an hour or 1 hour discussing this, but I'll try to be as succinct as possible. So on the one hand, we treat adrenal fatigue naturally by supporting it from a nutritional approach, right? Personalized nutrition therapy. We prescribe adrenal glandular therapy, which is essentially organ therapy, which dates back to the time of Hippocrates. As you can see here, we've recommended adrenal glandulars, okay? And the way it works is when you're dealing with a weakness in one organ, if you consume that same organ from an animal source, you're providing your body with the raw materials it needs, all the raw materials it needs to recreate that same organ. Adrenal complex, which includes vitamin C as well, because vitamin C high doses will help the adrenal glands as well. Potassium will help his adrenals as well, and you can see that his potassium is borderline low, as well as vitamin E. So vitamin E is essential for the adrenals. So that's how we are supporting the adrenal glands over the next few months through nutrition therapy. But what I always tell my patients is we have to get at the root. The long-term approach or goal is to get at the root of adrenal fatigue so that you can really strengthen your adrenal glands. As most of you would agree, we are living in the most stressful times ever. You're being bombarded with chemical stress, emotional stress, stress from the workplace, stress because of this whole COVID situation. You're dealing with 24/7 poisoning within your body because of the infections, 25 feet of intestines full of infections producing mycotoxins, putting your body in fight or flight. We're living in times where everybody's taking stimulants 24/7, caffeine, which stimulates your fight or flight response, your adrenal glands to produce adrenaline, which works in the short term, right? Gives you that boost of energy, but puts your body in fight or flight. Some people consume coffee 2-3 times a day. We live in such a hypersexualized society, and people are masturbating at least once a day, especially young folks. We'll see once, twice a day, and that will deplete kidney qi. If you study traditional Chinese medicine, they have a lot of literature and studies on excess sexual activity and what it can lead to, a cascade of problems. I've made a video about this on my YouTube channel you can take a look at. It's called Excess Masturbation and the Biochemical Effects, if you want to dive a little bit deeper. But that will deplete kidney qi as well. So just to give you an idea that these are all things that the patient has to think about. What could be some of the major causes that are really stressing out my adrenal glands, putting my body in fight or flight 24/7, causing my body to experience chronic stress? Is it my thoughts? Am I watching, the fake stream media, which is instilling fear and anxiety? Am I playing video games, right? First-person shooters, for hours a day, which obviously isn't healthy because you're constantly in fight or flight. So the patient, I always ask the patient, you got to take a look at your life and see where you can improve, right? How can you introduce more and more practices and beverages and supplements and alternatives into your life to emphasize a more parasympathetic response by your body, so your body can rest, so your body can digest, so your body can recover, essentially. But having said that, for most patients, one of the major root causes of adrenal fatigue happens to be these chronic infections in the body, 25 feet of intestines full of candida, fungal infections, which are poisoning the body 24/7, throwing the body into fight or flight response, burdening the liver, etc., etc. So I always recommend cleaning out the gut. Anybody who's dealing with chronic illness, I always recommend to my patients, if you want to take your health to the next level, then I highly recommend, especially if you've never done a proper gut detox, to clean out your sewage system, because that's going to improve every system of your body, your lymphatic system, your liver, etc. So that's in a nutshell, the long-term approach to treating adrenal fatigue and improving kidney qi. Okay, how can I reduce my vices and addictions? How can I reduce the stimulants? How can I reduce stress in my life? How can I clear out infections from the body and systemic acidosis and alkalize and purify my body, purify my thoughts and my emotions, and test my workplace and my bed, my sleeping place for EMF radiation, and make any adjustments necessary to live in a EMF pollution-free zone, etc. So we discuss all of these things in our consultations. So that's adrenal fatigue. That's treating adrenal fatigue. Now this one here, what you're seeing here with copper is copper toxicity, okay? Because it's up here in the high. And this is not a good situation for men especially, because copper is intimately related with estrogen, while zinc is intimately related with testosterone. Now, as copper rises to toxic levels, it antagonizes zinc. So copper and zinc are antagonists. So when one rises to toxic levels, it suppresses the function of the other. So as we can see here, as copper is rising to toxic levels, it is suppressing zinc in his body, which will affect his immune system, which can affect his masculinity as well, because again, zinc is intimately related with testosterone. And when copper rises to high levels chronically in a male or woman, estrogen levels rise as well. And so a man can begin to exhibit or manifest feminine-like qualities, right? And that's, if you don't mind, that's okay. But if you want to be masculine, if you were born a man and you want to maintain your masculinity, then removing this excess copper and restoring the balance between zinc and copper, which is 8:1 in ratio, the proper ratio, as we can see here, the zinc to copper ratio, the ideal ratio is 8:1, is restoring the hormone ratio, okay? Right now it's borderline low, borderline imbalance. So we want to improve this over time. And let me emphasize this. This is very important, especially for this patient. One of the major causes of migraines and headaches is not only brain toxicity issues because of heavy metals like we discussed, but it's copper accumulation in the brain and in the liver. So When copper builds to toxic levels, it accumulates mainly in the brain and in the liver and will cause migraines. So when I saw this, right away, I was like, he has to detoxify copper, this excess copper, from his body, from his brain, from his liver, and guaranteed, in combination with TRS, he will eliminate his severe migraines. His severe migraines will be a thing of the past, okay? Because copper toxicity is known to build in the brain and in the liver. We want to start detoxifying and antagonizing the toxic copper from his body. And this is why we've recommended this specific formulation designed to antagonize and detoxify copper from the body. It's called ZMC+, and it's comprised of zinc, manganese, and vitamin C, all of which are strong antagonists to copper. As I mentioned, zinc is an antagonist to copper, one of the major ones. Manganese is a strong antagonizer of copper, and so is vitamin C. But one thing you'll notice that for all the other supplements we've recommended, you could say strong doses, right? 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, 2 in the evening, right? For all these different supplements. But with ZMC+, we've only recommended 1 in the morning, 1 in the evening. So you'll notice it's a small dose compared to the other ones. And this is because, and this is something that many practitioners have not been trained, and a lot of patients who have done the hair tissue mineral analysis and nutrition therapy, they end up coming to me. Why? Because of severe copper dumping symptoms. Their practitioner wasn't aware of this, and they put the patient on very high doses, and the patient experienced very, very unpleasant copper dumping symptoms or copper detox symptoms. And so one thing we've been trained to do is to gently detoxify the copper toxicity from the patient's body so that they don't experience massive copper dumping symptoms. So that's why we use gentle doses. Cobalt is, a basic mineral. When it's too high, when it's excessively high like it is right now, a patient can demonstrate allergic reactions, dermatitis, but he didn't complain of it, but it's just something to be aware of. If he ever does exhibit those symptoms, then he will know that cobalt is something to consider. There's a write-up about cobalt, where it could be coming from. In this report, the patient can read. So one thing we see typically is when a patient is dealing with adrenal fatigue, he's also dealing with a slow metabolic rate, okay? And the calcium to phosphorus ratio over here, you can see is very high, 22.4, off the charts, which indicates a slow metabolism, a very slow metabolism. And here we also see that his thyroid ratio, calcium to potassium, is extremely high, which also indicates a very sluggish thyroid. So right now we're seeing a very common pattern, which is adrenal fatigue, slow metabolism, slow thyroid, and they all occur together. So that a patient, when they've experienced a lot of chronic stress throughout their lifetime, and again, this is very common, most patients I see, they're not fast metabolizers. Fast metabolizers today is very uncommon because fast metabolizers haven't experienced exhaustion yet, haven't experienced a wasting of their kidney qi, of their sympathetic response, of their stress response. Most patients have. And so that's why the majority of patients I see, they're dealing with slow metabolic rate, adrenal fatigue, because slow metabolism basically is the body's, again, intelligent response to slow everything down to try and preserve as much energy as possible. And hence why we see that he's dealing with chronic constipation. Very likely it's because of a sluggish, a slow thyroid. Hypothyroidism, and a slow metabolic rate are notorious for causing slow transition time, right? Reduced peristalsis, chronic constipation. Calcium to phosphorus, very high, indicates hypothyroidism. You see that it's the ratio between calcium and potassium. So the way we improve this thyroid ratio is, on the one hand, improve calcium metabolism so it doesn't rise to high levels, which we are addressing with the high dose B6 prescription. But also we're going to increase potassium, and by reducing calcium over time and increasing potassium, you're effectively balancing this ratio, bringing it back to closer to the ideal. It's not the cure for hypothyroidism, obviously, right? But it's one approach to improve and speed up the thyroid function. One of the major causes of thyroid destruction and hypothyroidism is the poisoning of your thyroid, okay? With fluoride, with chlorine, with bromine, okay? With toxic heavy metals. Fluoride, most of you know, is in everything. You can't escape it. It's in your water supply, which they say is healthy and safe for you to drink. But then 2 recent studies from Canada popped up in 2019. Finally, after 50, 60, 70 years of people, scientists and doctors worldwide saying that, hey guys, it's a cancer-causing chemical. And in fact, it is. It's nephrotoxic, it's liver toxic, it poisons your brain. And those 2 studies from Canada in 2019 proved finally that it reduces your IQ by many points. It calcifies your pineal gland, preventing many spiritual abilities, your ability to dream, your ability to produce melatonin so that you can sleep properly at night. But the main thing I want to share in this case is that it poisons your thyroid. Okay, back in the 1950s, doctors were trained, conventional doctors were trained to prescribe toxic fluoride to patients who were experiencing hyperthyroidism. Because by poisoning the thyroid with toxic fluoride, they were effectively able to suppress your thyroid function. So it's a known thyroid suppressor. And now, fluoride is found in your toothpaste, it's found in your tooth floss, in every beverage you enjoy, whether it's Coke, Sprite, juice, fruit juices from the supermarket, almond milk you buy from the supermarket. You go to a cafe, restaurant, they're serving you fluorinated tea, fluoridated coffee. It's very difficult to escape unless you reclaim control of your water supply and you do reverse osmosis, you distill your water, etc. So we have the poisoning of the thyroid, which is causing hypothyroidism, but also iodine deficiency. There was a project carried out by 3 doctors, Dr. Fletches, Dr. Brownstein, and I forgot the other doctor, but they determined out of 90+% of the patients, thousands of patients they tested worldwide, 93%, I think it was, proved to be severely iodine deficient. And one of the main minerals your thyroid needs every day, in which the body does not produce, is iodine, okay? And so we see here he's supplementing with iodine, which is great, okay? Which is great, because otherwise I would have also recommended it. That's going to improve thyroid function. With him purifying his water supply, that's going to improve thyroid function. And what else can I say here? What else should I say? Just quickly looking at the ratios. This last one I'm going to talk about is the glucose metabolism ratio. Calcium to magnesium ratio is the glucose metabolism ratio, and it basically tells us how your body is metabolizing sugar. Your body, your cells need sugar in order to function, in order to produce ATP, right? So that you have proper energy levels. And so what happens is when your cells are not able, when your body's not able to metabolize glucose, you're going to experience low energy. The infections in your body are going to thrive. And in fact, we see many of my patients who do my gut detox course, they pull out candida, they see, the candida webs, they see the roots that candida has and has created, because once it starts off as a unicellular yeast form, and then it evolves into its fungal form, which then produces roots, and it burrows its roots through your intestines into your blood supply to tap into your blood supply and basically tap into the sugar. And that's why many people, even if you fast, candida still survives, because they tap into whatever amount of glucose you have in your bloodstream. So when you're not metabolizing glucose, it's not a good thing. It's an indicator of prediabetes, insulin resistance, right? Glucose intolerance. So the formulation that we prescribe for patients who are dealing with poor glucose metabolism is the Min-Plex B. Magnesium and chromium and B6 are all necessary. Many of you know who are nutritionists, who work with patients, diabetes, that chromium is one of the most essential minerals needed by anybody who is pre-diabetic, who's dealing with poor glucose metabolism, right? As is magnesium. So this tackles two birds with one stone, which is it improves both calcium and magnesium metabolism. It improves it, but it also improves glucose metabolism. Hence why the higher dose, 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, 2 in the evening. So that's it, ladies and gentlemen. That's all I have to say about this hair tissue mineral analysis. I hope you enjoyed it. If you're interested in having your hair tested and learning about your biochemistry, you can mail in your hair sample from anywhere in the world. And once it arrives, in just about 5 business days, we will have your results ready. You can go to my website, soreadyforhealth.com, and you can check out the different hair tissue mineral analysis packages that I offer. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.